Okay, members of council.
My ear just went. I'm getting tinnitus from your banging that.
I hope everybody had a wonderful dinner. Nobody took me up on my offer. Thank you.
Were we supposed to have dinner?
Okay, so where's Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kelly, are you ready for your item? Okay. So we're going to go back to page 4. Page 4, ED 29.8. Councillor Kelly held the item. Yes, Councillor Shiner.
There was an item that I wished to have added to the agenda, but hadn't been signed before we broke for dinner. Could I just introduce that for circulation now?
Well, we will.
Why you've got such people?
I haven't seen it yet.
Whenever you have a moment, Madam Speaker.
So Councillor Kelly, on ED 29.8, Major Cultural Organization 2018 allocations. Do you have questions of staff?
Yes, I do, Speaker.
Okay.
To Mr. Farrig.
Okay.
Now, I noticed in the report that the total amount of money that was to be granted to these institutions was $2.9 million, etc., and that all of the money has been dispersed. Is that correct? There's no reserve fund as there has been for others.
Through the Speaker, yes, Council did in fact approve a $9.2 million allocation for the major cultural organizations that are identified in the report. We have had an opportunity to review our reserve funds, and we're not aware of any other reserve funds beyond this allocation.
Stop there. You're answering a question that I haven't asked, at least not publicly, although I asked you privately and personally. So all the money, all the grant money has been dispersed. There's no reserve fund for appeals.
That's correct.
Are there any reserve funds that the city has that one could tap into in order to restore the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra to their 2017 level?
Through the Speaker, no, we have not been able to ascertain if there are any reserve funds that are suitable for that purpose.
Okay, thank you. My next question is to Mr. Williams. Since there's no way of tapping into reserve funds to come up with the $150,000 that had been I was going to say taken away, but the difference between what these two institutions had received from 17 and what is being proposed for 18, since there's no way of tapping into reserve funds, would it be reasonable to say that the only way of upping the grants to the two institutions that I've mentioned is to take the money from the others?
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Would it be fair to say that that the reductions reflected an inability, no, not so much as an unwillingness, but an inability to follow some of the equity program policies of the City of Toronto?
The reductions were based upon the peer review panel. The panel is outlined in the report, and there were a number of aspects of the review of these two organizations that led the peer review panel to recommend decreases at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker. Those are my questions.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question to Mr. Williams. Can you talk about the process that we went through or the city went through to determine how these allocations took place?
Certainly, Councillor. As is usual for the majors, we had a peer panel put together to advise staff. They met. They reviewed all the applications. Staff also met with the organizations and reviewed their business plans and their submissions. And on the basis of those two inputs, the staff made the recommendations that you see in the report in front of you.
Okay, so and the big part, Madam Chair, it's hard to actually hear Mr. Williams. He's
If I can please have some quiet, please. Councillor DiCiano, Councillor Mamalidi.
Thank you, Councillor DiCiano.
Okay, please.
Can you speak, because a big part of the process is a peer review process where we're actually the peers within the, I guess, the arts community actually review all of this. So can you talk about the peer review process outside of the city process that came up with these allocations and the importance of how they prioritize things?
So the peer review panel used, and I'm just looking now for the membership of the panel.
From what I read, pretty distinguished individuals
Very distinguished
within the community.
Leaders of major cultural institutions in Toronto that aren't part of this program, obviously, so there's no conflict of interest. They were given three different, or they with staff devised three main criteria on which to evaluate the grants, and one of those is move towards diversity and inclusion, which is a large priority for this city. Second one is the financial and governance stability and the financial results of the organization. And the third one is the impacts the organization has in Toronto.
Okay, so based on that peer review, based on, and you reviewing that and your recommendations, some of the organizations went up, some of the organizations did go down, as Councillor Kelly had mentioned. That's correct?
Correct.
So, and he'd also mentioned too, so if we look at trying to add back that $150,000 to the organizations, we're really probably going to have to take away from somebody else because there's no opportunity through reserves or anywhere else to do that. Now, from your perspective as staff, do you think that's fair when we went through such a process to get to this decision that if all of a sudden we on the council floor decide to just remove money from one organization, add it to another, probably doesn't it probably undermines the process. Wouldn't you agree
It would
with that?
totally undermine the process. I mean, we set up a peer review panel, we set up this process and the evaluation of these organizations for a purpose, and it's staff's recommendation backed by the peer review panel to make these adjustments.
And I guess my last question, so over the last number of years we have actually had increases to the arts, and the major organizations have actually benefited over the last number of years. So when you're looking at the majors on a whole, I won't get into individuals because I can't recall some of them, but we've actually increased the investments to these organizations, probably some of the ones who have been recommended to have a decrease, but in fact in years past we've increased the benefits that we have given them through the arts increases. Is that not correct?
As a bundle, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Significantly.
Thank you. Mayor Tory?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I just had one question for Mr. Williams. And as opposed to undermining the process, which we were just discussing, is it possible that some of these organizations could earn back, as it were, some, subject to the peer review, earn back some of this money if they demonstrate a real interest in working with us and working on their own to address some of the things that are important criteria, including equity-related matters, in the coming period of time?
Exactly what this review purpose, the purpose of the review is exactly as you outlined, Mr. Mayor, is to provide them with guidance and an indication of the priorities of the city And if they follow those priorities, then they would score much better in next year's review.
And just to make that clear as well, I understand, are there some meetings or seminars or, you know, kind of things we have in order to help them understand what our objectives are, so that in the forthcoming year, those who might want more, whether it's ones that got less this year, slightly less, or otherwise, would have an opportunity to understand the things that are important to us in the determination of those grants and the peer reviewers.
And we will sit down one-on-one with these organizations to explain the scores and to explain the feedback and to give them as much advice as we can. They obviously know their business better than we do, but to give them as much advice as we can on what they can do to reverse in the cases of the cuts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Shen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. These organizations that receive major cultural organization allocations, many of them have been supported by City of Toronto for a number of years. I'm assuming roughly how many years, for example, the Art Gallery or the
Some of these go
Canadian
back.
Opera?
Some of these go back decades and decades.
Okay.
So the city would, before Metro, or Metro would do some of the funding, as well as the city after amalgamation. Most of these, in fact, have been on the list for that, TIFF and others. There are a couple of new additions, but most of them have been in some form of a program. It wasn't called this 20 years ago, but that's what it was.
So some of these are more directly equity-seeking programs, such as Pride Toronto or the Toronto Caribbean Carnival. Some of the other ones, like TIFF, have made a bit of improvement in terms of diversity-related engagement. But the other ones still struggle. That's my understanding, is that your understanding with respect to reaching out to the diversity of our city.
There's certainly not enough evidence for staff and the peer review panel to come to the positive conclusion on that answer.
So I heard that you would consider favorably if there were improvements on certain things that you're looking for, including diversity. But on the flip side, my question also is, if you don't see enough progress, would there be some form of an accountability for even the money that's being given right now in terms of diversity?
Sorry, I missed the middle of that question.
So in terms of the money that's currently being allocated for these organizations, is there some form of an accountability to meet certain criteria, even for the funds that's being given with respect to diversity? And how does that happen in terms of benchmarks or some sort of a strategic plan?
So we're working on that those specifics as we speak, and the metrics. They're not easily assembled by some of these organizations. They are more easily by others. We're working with them on that. I would say that if they don't continue to improve or start to improve, then the grant adjustments next year that we would recommend to council would be reflective of that pattern.
Now, there's a wide variety even within the arts form within here, particularly festivals being included with, and the festivals are the ones that are more directed to diversity-related things like Pride and Caribbean. So how do you isn't apples and oranges in some ways to kind of try to evaluate programs, or are you looking at a festival strategy that can look at some of these things separately because of the economic impact and the kind of level of engagement that happens during the time?
So each of these organizations is very different, and the businesses they run, the cultural pursuits that they celebrate and train, the excellence they show, are all very different, and therefore the panel has to take that variety into consideration, which is why the panel itself is quite different, has a variety of different disciplines involved. They respect that and they work hard at that, but it is a challenge.
Now there are major festivals like this, and then you have minor festivals that are supported by City of Toronto through SDFA that are 8,000 or 10,000. But there are a number of middle-sized festivals, like not middle-sized, they bring enormous amount of contribution, like Taste of Danforth or Tamil Fest and other places like that. Taste of Manila. Is there kind of a strategy to look at, because there seems to be a big middle gap in terms of how we support cultural activities within the city?
So there are a number of organizations that help those particular festivals, the province being a notable one. I would welcome a recommendation that asked us to look at that. We do have internal policy, but if you wanted to put a recommendation to that, staff would be happy to fulfill that.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. Williams, through you, Speaker, you have three areas in which evaluation were made with respect to all 11 of these majors. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct.
All right. And so as part of the evaluation process, what was the objective? What was the goal? What were you trying to achieve?
We wanted to make sure that the city was getting an appropriate return in a variety of dimensions for the amount of money the city is investing in these organizations.
And you've looked at the economic impact with respect to these organizations?
We get that information when it's available, yes,
Where do you get that from?
from the organizations themselves.
Right. And so there are two specific organizations that we're looking at, the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Both have seen a decrease with respect to their funding
Correct.
and have had a ongoing, I guess, a historical element in terms of where specific funding was, I guess, guaranteed and or assumed.
There's never been a guarantee from year to year. These grants are always dependent upon council's annual provisions.
So had there been other periods when there was a reduction with respect to the grant, specifically on the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Symphony Opera?
I can't answer that accurately. I don't think so, but I can't guarantee that
So
answer.
would it then be accurate for me to say that there had been a consistent funding formula in place where they consistently received said amounts of funds, which was on an annualized basis, where they essentially expected, or there was a guaranteed that there would be a certain amount of fund coming to them?
So there would have been some years when there is just an inflationary increase or no change,
Right.
then those changes didn't come to council, so there would have been a pattern
Fair
for a
enough.
number of years of
So,
steady state.
so the cultural merits, the community service, public impact, organizational resiliency, and financial management, what was it that you and your staff expected from specifically these two organizations? Because based on the information I have looking at others have actually met or exceeded the expectation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what did you expect from these two?
We expected more evidence from these organizations with respect to diversity
Right.
and with respect to financial and governance consistency. And the panel pointed out that in these cases, especially in one of them, that
Which
was
one?
not.
Which one?
I actually don't know how public the detailed review the panel did is for council. I probably would be more comfortable answering that question in camera.
Okay, fair enough. I don't want to go in camera, but that's fine. Okay. Okay, so prior to the peer review process, did you and or any members of your staff reach out to the different organizations to let them know what the changes and or the expectation was in terms of this review process?
Yes.
And
We met one-on-one with all of the organizations.
right, and at that time, were they amenable to, with respect to this process? Did they, or perhaps say to you, you know, I don't think we can achieve those particular objectives. We don't want to participate. We just want to, I don't know, maybe just continue to receive the funds without any sort of restrictions?
I wasn't present in the meeting, so I'm
So
not
would
sure
it be
about
safe
the
to say
tone.
then that there was an expectation that the peer review process would take place and everyone who is actually going to receive funds as part of this program, the majors, would participate?
Yes.
And so as part of this participation process, the peer review has identified specifically two organizations that have not complied, and as a result, there's been effort to, I don't say remarkably, but maybe marginally reduce the funding elements that have been traditionally been, I guess, accepted as a guaranteed funding from the city?
Well, I'd hope that none of them felt it was guaranteed in the first place.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
somebody does, because that's part of the reason why we're having this debate and discussion here, because I'm sure that folks have reached out either to the mayor's office or to others and so on to say they're not happy with respect to what's here.
Well, they've also reached out to us on that.
They've
too,
reached
so-
out to you as well. So they're not happy.
You used the phrase "did not comply." I think all organizations espouse some of these goals. So I wouldn't be prepared to say that they flat out don't do anything on this respect, but in the peer review panel's eyes, and that was consistent with staff's, not enough was done.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly to speak.
Oh, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I was surprised at the reduction in grants to the Canadian Opera Company and to the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. These are two very high-profile institutions that have performed admirably over the decades and have added to the attractiveness of the city as a result. You know, they're two groups or two boards that I really think help make this city one of the premier cities of the world. And it just didn't seem appropriate that, at first glance, that their grants would be reduced from the previous year, because there's been no decline in the quality of their performances. If you go to the opera, or if you go to Roy Thompson Hall and listen to the symphony, these are world-class institutions. And it's regrettable to an extent that they've had their grant reduced for reasons outside of performance, and that is their ability to adhere to or move towards the equity policies and goals of the City of Toronto. When you look at these 11 organizations, Speaker, I think that you might find that they're not identical in how they're organized or how they run. And I would argue that it's easier for some of those boards to make the changes that we're anticipating or promoting than it is for others. I suspect that sitting on the TSO board requires people with certain qualifications that you may not find if you're sitting on the board of Harbourfront Centre or Toronto Artscape. And so I think there should be a certain awareness or sensitivity to the differences that exist between these organizations and the boards, the composition of the boards that run them. It's my hope, Speaker, that that in the peer review done for next year's budget, that these two organizations will have made significant progress towards the equity goals that the city has established for them, and as a result that their grant will be restored to its previous level, or even, frankly, Speaker, enhanced, because these are two very high-profile organizations that I think should be supported very strongly by the City of Toronto. And I thank our staff and my colleagues for increasing the support for the backup support for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra's bank loans. I think we increased it by about $2 million, and they were most grateful for that. And I would hope that going forward that everyone would appreciate the excellence that these two organizations bring to their artistic forms, symphonic music and classical opera.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not, as you can see, I didn't move any motion because there was just no way that we could give them, that we could restore their grants without taking from others. And I think, frankly, Speaker, that would be unfair to the others. So let's see what happens next year, and I hope that these two organizations will meet the standards that we've set for them.
Thank you. So maybe then we can just move the item. Yeah, unless Councillor Crawford, do you need to speak? No? Do we need to speak if we're just moving the, okay. We want to get the agenda complete. Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be as brief as I can. The major cultural organizations, the 11 of them that are in this report, contribute an incredible amount to the culture and the arts culture of this city. Undoubtedly, what they do is incredible, and I think you see that in over the $2+ million that we provide every year. And we have, over the last 8 years, this council has done historic increases to arts funding. These organizations, plus many others across the city, have benefited from the increase of arts funding to all of these arts, which is incredibly important. We need to recognize that. But there was a very specific process that we went through, as was discussed through the questions. Even Councillor Kelly mentioned that. This was a peer review process that the esteemed leaders in the arts culture of the city peer reviewed this, and what they found was there were some, when you're looking at the challenges with diversity and equity, we're not, that we provide, we're writing the checks to these organizations. There are certain policies, expectations that have to happen, and this peer review process determined that some of these organizations may not have been meeting them. Not that they won't in the future, but this was a determination of why we saw a little bit less money. And when you're looking at a little bit less money, some of these organizations were getting $1 million and we're reducing it by $50,000. Yes, $50,000 has an impact, but it may not be the same kind of extent. And I was just speaking with Councillor Fillion. We went through this process with the Civic Theatres a couple of years ago, and we had to appoint a board. And that board, we were very clear as we were going through the process that it had to meet certain diversity and equity goals. And we met those. And we have an incredibly strong board right now that when I look at that board, and Councillor Fillion is on that board with me, as is Councillor Fletcher, incredible board. But we've met those targets. And I think even though they haven't met them in this round, I think there's that opportunity the next round as we look at what we're going to be doing next year to actually increase the funding and support these organizations. At the end of the day, we do need to support these organizations. We do support them incredibly well. And I do support the staff recommendations. That was a difficult decision, I think, with the peer review process that they had to do. And we have to accept that process. To do anything other really impedes that kind of a process.
Okay. Come on. Let's make it brief. We want to get the item dealt with. Councillor Shan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a motion. I'll come to the motion in a bit. I just wanted to thank our Economic Development and Culture staff as well as the peer review team for continuing to push equity and diversity as part of the criteria for continued arts-related funding. These organizations do a fabulous job, but they can do better in terms of diversifying their board, in terms of making their attendance better, in terms of diverse individuals, young people from diverse backgrounds being able to access even the arts. It doesn't mean the artists have to change as a whole, but attendance could change, the staffing could change, the access to some of the spaces that they have could be made available. So there are multiple ways to do equity work, and I think there needs to be a lot more emphasis, and I'm glad that as a city who says equity and diversity is our primary focus, continue to put that criteria into this. My reason for the motion that came out, and I'm glad I had a bit of support from our manager for economic development and culture for this idea, is to start to explore a way to support medium-sized festivals. By that, I've kind of put that directly in there, between 100,000 to 500,000 attendees. And this will be a handful of festivals that happens across the city. We have to find better ways to support these festivals. They may be more geographic-based or ethno-specific based, but these festivals draw huge strength to our city in terms of economic development. They celebrate major parts of our community, so I hope that folks, councillors would support this so that we can start exploring ways to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday, quickly.
Yes, Speaker, I will be quick.
Well, I don't see your name, Councillor Robinson. Yeah, but you have to put your name up on the screen so I know. How do I know you're asking a question? Okay. So, Councillor Robinson, 3 minutes, clarification
so
of the motion.
my question to you is, who establishes the attendance numbers? The festival, I mean, that's the challenge. You've cited, I think, 100,000 to 500,000. Again, I don't see the motion. It was up there for a very short period of time, but that's a very challenging thing to identify the actual number of attendees, and then those submitting may, who knows where they're getting their numbers from. So that's my question to you.
Well, I think generally this is to give a rough idea of the type of festivals we are talking about. I could say medium-sized festival, which doesn't really mean much. When we say this, police usually say what kind of attendance has been in the past years because they determine how many officers there. City of Toronto staff actually kind of guess the numbers so that they ask what type of parking is required. So we do have some ways in which we can have an approximation of it. But if you take that off and put like medium-sized festivals, that also draws a bit of subjectivity into the decision. So that's why.
So what's an example of a medium-sized festival?
So, festivals such as Taste of Manila, for example.
Pardon?
Taste of Manila, and, they estimate between 150,000 people. Tamil Fest, about 150,000 people. Taste of Danforth, much more than this. But there are many much more than that. What is it, million? Yeah. So, Taste of Lawrence. So I think the festivals that draw strength both geographically and ethnoculturally have been struggling to get the city to formally support those festivals. And it's important for us to have structural ways in which we can say, we'll give you this, this, and this. It doesn't even have to be money, but in lieu of your contribution, we are going to be able to support those festivals. There has to be a way to look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a motion, please. I think some folks will recognize this as a similar motion last year, and this is to withhold payment of the $260,000 for Pride Toronto for funding and leave it in the care of the General Manager of Economic Development, recognizing that there's a break possible over the next number of months in Council. I'll leave the observation that, an entire year has passed since we had a debate about this in the last Council, where the Toronto Police were excluded from participation, and here we are a year later and nothing's changed. And I'm frustrated with that. I know constituents have spoken to me that they've been frustrated with that. I'd like to see this matter get resolved. I'm confident that it can, but I think we should signal that it's important to us that this matter get resolved. And simply just withholding the payment on that, I don't have a problem otherwise approving things in general. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Holliday, did you move a motion?
I did.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion. What is the motion? Okay, because there's questions. Okay,
Don't ask questions.
questions, Councillor Wong Tam.
Yeah, no
clear.
questions. Just vote
Okay.
against.
I understand.
All right.
Thank you.
Councillor DiCiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just rise to give my strong support to Councillor Shan's motion for economic development to investigate ways to support festivals that draw 100 to 500,000 attendees in various parts of the city. Let me tell you, as the former chair of Toronto Ribfest Food Music Festival, one of the largest outdoor fundraisers, the amount of time and energy that community groups go through to put these festivals on, and the economic benefit that it brings to our city is tremendous. And our process couldn't be poorer at this point. Really what we're doing is we're just picking certain festivals here and there to give money to, and there's so many worthy festivals. You look at all the Ribfests across the city that are run by service clubs, Rotary clubs, every single dollar going back to nothing but charitable organizations across the city. Why shouldn't we be supporting them in any which way we can? I can't tell you what it would mean to a Rotary club to perhaps waive a park fee when it comes time to putting out $800,000-900,000 before they even receive a dollar from attendants that come to the events. So I want to thank Councillor Shan for bringing this motion forward, and I look forward to seeing ways in which we can support these festivals, because really they're job creators in the city. They bring tourism like crazy, and it's what great cities do. We bring people together through festivals like these. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to move the staff recommendations. I'd like to ask you not to support Councillor Holliday's motion. I don't really think I have to get too much into that. I think that the staff has actually made wise decisions with respect to who we're funding and how we're funding them. I also want to support Councillor Shan's motion. I think the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra are two great institutions in our city. I've gone to both of their shows and so on, and I will continue to go to their shows. I want to thank the General Manager of Economic Development and his staff for bringing the recommendations here. We've heard from the General Manager of EDC that they've gone through a process. They want to ensure that the city's motto, as we always want to purport that we support, diversity is our strength. They want these organizations to obviously reflect culturally the essence, which is the city, quite frankly. And I realize that for some, change does take some time, and change is difficult and so on. But I do believe that these two organizations actually will comply and will come forward with respect to the necessary changes and so on. Madam Speaker, what we're hearing is that there has been a peer review. It hasn't been councillors making this decision, or has it been our own staff, but a jury or a body of peers that have reviewed the process with respect to the criteria that has been outlined by our staff here. I won't bother reading them just in the interest of time, but in the sense of the details. But one looks at cultural merits, the other looks at community service and public impact. The other element of the criteria of the evaluation looks at the organizational resiliency and the financial management and so on. And so I'm happy that Councillor Kelly has actually spoken eloquently, and no, that's fine, spoken eloquently about this and so on. We've had discussions. Councillor Kelly and I are both on the Economic Development Committee. I chair it, and Councillor Kelly is a valued member of this. He's also an esteemed member of this council and has been involved with the city for a very long time. And so I appreciate that he has been also on the board, I think, the symphony, and so he's quite aware. And I'm sure that the leaders of the symphony and obviously the opera company are watching and are aware as to what our desire and intentions are. The only way that we could, impact the changes and necessity of bringing forward a new dimension in terms of how they do things is to reduce the component portions of the funding. In the case of the symphony, it is a 3.9% or $50,000. They are still realizing an amount of $1,220,000. In the opera company, it is a reduction of $100,000. They received $1.6 million last year. They'll be receiving $1.5 million, or a reduction of 6.25%. I didn't ask the General Manager about the economic impact and so on. I believe that there are many other organizations who have vastly more significant economic impact than both these two organizations, in fact, combined. But we're not suggesting that for a moment, that they not be funded by the city. We are suggesting that they are funded. However, we want to see that they're more inclusive, more reflective with respect to the way that this city is actually moving forward and so on. And I suspect that this decision today will help to influence their ability to foster that element as quickly as possible. As it relates to Pride funding, there's so much pride in the community of Toronto as we celebrate Pride. Last week, Madam Chair, I was in Chengdu, China, and I spoke about the amazing things that are taking place. Pride was one of the things that I featured with respect to my introductory remark. Later, I had a half an hour discussion through a TED Talk to talk about Toronto, to talk about investment, to talk about our diversity, to talk about the things that we're doing. We need to ensure that we celebrate and embrace our diversity, not just in words, but in fact deeds. So I ask you not to support Councillor Holliday's motion and to support Councillor Shan's motion and also the staff recommendation. I want to thank Mr. Williams and his team for the great work that they continue to do. And I will be continuing to support the Canadian Opera Company as well as the Toronto Symphony going forward, Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I rise largely to speak in favor of Councillor Shan's motion and also to urge councillors, members of council to vote against Councillor Holliday's very unproductive and very unhelpful motion at this particular point in time. Councillor Shan's motion, I think, it's largely overdue. There are a number of fantastic cultural events that take place across our city that oftentimes go unrecognized, and perhaps it's because they're small grassroots initiatives that have grown over a period of time, and they serve a particular population that's not necessarily in the downtown core. But nevertheless, they draw enormous numbers, and they end up being huge catalytic cultural activation zones in many different communities. And oftentimes it's a demonstration of that cultural community strength, which I love to explore. And I think that's what makes us very keen to explore the other parts of the city. Whether it's actually an event that's taking place in Scarborough or North York or perhaps in Etobicoke, it's those cultural events that actually draws us out there. So I would like to see, Madam Speaker, more support for those oftentimes unrecognized cultural gems that are oftentimes more than hitting above its weight. They have the ability to stretch a dime into a dollar, and I would love to see what a little bit of support from this order of government can do for those organizations and those very worthy initiatives. And Madam Speaker, with respect to Councillor Holliday's motion, the LGBT2S community has had a very extremely difficult year. I think you'd have to be living under a rock, or perhaps not ever having picked up a newspaper, or perhaps not even turn on the radio to understand that this is a community that has been devastated by the murder and missing that have taken place related to those in the village and those around the village. And to have the one cultural institution and the one cultural organization now once again held hostage, Madam Speaker, every year, as it oftentimes is held hostage by this chamber, even as we try to debate it, the funding for Pride Toronto is just grossly unfair. And this year, more than any other year, I think that council needs to support Pride. They need to ensure that this organization and the community that they represent knows that this city is behind them 110%. They should not be punitively punished simply because somebody wants to take their funding and put it into a reserve account until the police can march, which they've already decided that they're not going to march. So you're asking them you're asking staff to withhold funding that they already rely upon. Performances have been booked, stages have been reserved, deposits need to be made, venues need to be paid. There are all sorts of things in motion for a multi-million-dollar cultural festival. Biggest one in the city, biggest one. No other comes even close to the numbers that Pride produces. And you, once again, want to hold this organization hostage. It's grossly unfair, and I think it's rather punitive for all sorts of reasons that I just can't even imagine why anyone would want to take a run at this community in this year. Thank you very much.
Oh, Councillor Cressy.
Can you just put yourself down?
Don't speak.
Just put yourself down.
I did.
You can't. There's no. Oh, okay. You can now.
That guy's.
No, I know. I know. I'm just waiting to see what he does.
Cressy, your time is running.
He has the floor.
Oh.
The deputy.
Point of order, Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding my feelings towards wanting to support the police, and I feel it's very important, I have consulted with a number of members of council, and there is absolutely no support for my motion. A number have urged me to withdraw it, and so I will do that for the peace of this chamber and for the peace of this file going forward. I am very upset, though, that this matter hasn't been resolved, and I hope that's a signal that, that this needs to get sorted out. I think it's very important for the city, and I think it's very important that our police be welcome to all of these cultural events. And I hope that the chamber will allow me to withdraw the motion, but it is an important matter.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Councillor Holyday is asking to withdraw his motion. On favor? Recorded. Councillor Cressy, you don't need to speak now, right?
Councillor Davis. Councillor Perks, please. Councillor Karagianis.
Councillor Cressy and Councillor Grimes, please.
Councillor Perks. Councillor Perks, your vote, please. Councillor Carmichael Grubb, when you're seated.
The motion to withdraw carries unanimously, 34 in favor.
Okay, we have one motion by Councillor, Councillor Perks, you want to speak? I do not. Okay, we have one motion by Councillor Shan. If we can put it on the screen. There it is. On favor? Recorded.
Councillor Perruzza, please, and Councillor Shiner.
The amendment carries unanimously, 34 in favor.
Item is amended. On favor? Recorded vote. Now, members, after this vote, we do have some members' motions that we have to introduce.
Councillor Perruzza, Councillor Wong-Tam, please, Councillor Layton, Councillor Davis,
Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Crawford, please.
Councillor Layton, your vote, please.
The item is amended, carries 33 to 1.
Okay. If I can have the members. Councillor Shiner.
I would ask for permission to add an item to the agenda concerning enumeration for public directors of Creatio building. Should be Build Toronto and the Toronto Portlands Company. It's urgent because they've had meetings since January and haven't been able to get paid.
On favor? Carried. Pardon? Councillor Sal?
to this?
Yeah, just stand up and say motion that's in place.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to move the motion that lease arrangements for tenants at 1762 Shepherd Avenue East. The reason for urgency, motion is urgent because Council does not make a decision now. The tenants will not have adequate space for summer programming, and hundreds of clients will be impacted. Thank you.
On favor? On favor? Carried. Councillor Lane?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I seek leave to introduce a motion with regards to a Toronto local appeal body hearing at 220 Barton Avenue.
On favor? Carried. Deputy Mayor Holliday?
I do. Would like to introduce a motion, please, for the appointment of Councillor Sow to the Parks and Environment Committee, and as we know that would be Shelley Carroll's former seat on the committee.
On favor? This is just introducing.
Yeah.
On favor? Carried. Okay. Mayor Tory, you have two.
Yes, he does, and they're on the
Yes, Madam Speaker, I would like to move a motion concerning the allocation of funds from the Toronto Community Foundation, and it's urgent because it relates to the ability that the city and the foundation have, well, I can explain when we discuss it, to actually get the money to the families affected by the Yonge Street tragedy.
On favor? Carried. You have another one?
Apparently he does. FCM?
This is, oh yes, I'm sorry, I didn't know I saw the title of it. Madam Speaker, in order for us to have a supportive motion, to have the FCM support an initiative to allow a broader range of private contributions to be made to charities, we have to pass a resolution here at the Council supporting that so that it can then go on to the FCM, and this will facilitate that. And those meetings are coming up shortly.
Okay, on favor? Carried. That's it? Okay, so let's just do a little bit of housekeeping before we go to the next item. MM 4142. Councillor Ainsley, your motion, do you want to move it? Okay. Just vote on it. All in favor? Carried. MM 4143. Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam on 126, 128 Hazelton. On favor? Okay. All right. On favor? Carried. MM 4144 by Councillor Crawford. On favor? Carried. MM 4145. Recorded? Recorded vote.
Councillor Kelly, please. Councillor Karygiannis. Councillor Perks, please. Councillor Davis, Councillor Shiner, and Councillor Perruzza. Councillor Perruzza, please. Who's on the phone?
Councillor Perruzza? Councillor Perruzza? Can you please get off the phone? We're in the middle of a vote. Can somebody just grab his phone and throw it in the toilet?
The item carries 32-1.
MM 4146 by Councillor Fletcher. Recorded vote.
Councillor Mihevc, please.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Shiner, Councillor Karagianis, Councillor Sau.
The item carries 33-1.
MM 4147 by Councillor Cressy. On favor? Carried. So our next item is on page 5, which is PG 29.4, 29.5, 29.6, and 29.7, held by Councillor Cressy. So we're dealing with all 4 items. So, Councillor Cressy? Now, does anybody have any questions? Okay, Councillor Cressy, did you want to speak?
As it's late, I can speak quickly. I have a series of, first of all, I'll move the supplementary report, which is there, as well as I have a technical amendment from staff and an amendment, and so there's a series of them with the supplementary report, the technical amendments, an amendment from my staff. Those can be put on the screen. I'll say a few brief words because it is a big report, but it's late, so I will keep it short. This has been 4 years of work, comprising a new master plan for all of downtown Toronto. It is the first master plan since the mid-1970s, and a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and huge thank yous have to go to the city planning team with Greg and Anne-Marie and Andrew Farncorn there, but as well all of their staff in city planning and across the divisions and departments, because in front of us are infrastructure strategies from hard to soft infrastructure, from the new parks and public realm plan that PFNR has worked on, to work on culture, to work on energy. It's a tremendous amount of work. And it's work that staff have led, but I also should note that the councillors for downtown Toronto, Councillor Wong Tam, Councillor Troisi, and before, then Deputy Mayor Councillor McConnell worked so hard on. I'll just tell you that the population in downtown Toronto 15 years ago was 113,000 people. Today it's 250,000 people. Based on projections, it will be 500,000 people in 25 years. It will have doubled in population in 15 years and doubled again in the next 25. But the real story of downtown, and this is something that economic development and our chair, Michael Thompson, know all too well, is that when downtown does well, Toronto does well. That a prosperous downtown makes for a prosperous city, and that we are all truly in this together. The fact that 1/3 of all the jobs in the city are located downtown, that it produces 51% of the GDP, that's a sign of success, and that's a sign that it's incumbent on all of us to ensure that downtown remains and continues to remain vibrant. But what TO-CORE really speaks to is not just the importance of downtown remaining vibrant and prosperous, but livable. That's what this master plan talks about at its core, that we must, in the future and for the next 25 years, build neighborhoods, not just build buildings. That's the future of downtown, that it remains equitable for all incomes, that it remains livable for all ages, and that it remains sustainable for future generations. And so TO-CORE represents our collective vision for the future, and real thanks must go to our exceptional staff, and I'll single out our chief planner, who before assuming the role of chief planner was driving TO-CORE. And with that, I'm happy to speak in its support and move the supplementary report along with some amendments. Oh, and planning and growth management. David, I almost forgot you. How could I forget you? It came through PGM. And Councillor Shiner for recognizing that this was not TYCC, but PGM because it was citywide. And I should note that at the end. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And if I can ask the clerks can put the motions on the screen. I do have several of them. They can scroll through it very slowly. I think they're starting. Great. So there's 3 different sets of motions, and they all do 3 different things. And please take your time to read it. Some of it is requesting that the provincial government strengthen the requirements around the building code, which is not necessarily related to TO Core, but I took the opportunity to try to improve the materials being used and the quality of construction, and then the other two are specifically speaking to TO Core. I want to thank the incredible work of the staff, and like Councillor Cressy and Councillor McConnell and now Councillor Troisi, this really does represent a 25-year vision into the future about what the City of Toronto will look like, especially with respect to the heart of the city and now the Central Waterfront Plan. When I first moved a motion back in 2012, it was largely because I was struggling with the amount of intensification that was coming into the neighborhoods that I represent, and I know that many of the downtown councillors experienced the same thing. They were very, very challenging just because we were seeing density coming down in every single corner, and the sites were all sorts of different sizes, and there was a tall buildings guideline to sort of guide some of the built form, but it really didn't seem to have a clear, cohesive vision that told us how to grow the downtown. And I think it was so large because oftentimes we look at urban planning and just take a look at just the pieces around height, the density, and the massing, but we don't take a look at all the social infrastructure. And the social infrastructure was the piece that I felt was very much missing. And I know that there were other councillors who were involved with this discussion, including Councillor Vaughan, who kept asking the question, how much is too much? And I think what you have before you, Madam Speaker, is an incredible body of work that actually sets out now this very vibrant, livable downtown. And it wasn't an easy body of work because this particular master plan, which now maps out the next 25 years of incredible residential growth for the city, I know that Councillor Cressy says it started in 2014, but I feel like it started even before then. And I know that city staff had struggled on how to begin this work because it was largely so much. But really, in a nutshell, we are asking, can you overlay urban planning with a social planning lens? So therefore, make sure we have the human quality infrastructure and social services around it. And now let's put an economic development lens around it. And then on top of that, let's make sure that we have a city that is going to be resilient into the future, especially as we get to deal with the rapid change of climates. So this new downtown plan represents all of that, including 41 various different documents, 10 secondary plans, and 64 special area policies, specific policies. That was an incredible amount of work, and I want to say thank you to the city staff because it's because of the visionary leadership of Greg Lintern and his predecessor before then, but also this is a very technical document, and I can't think of another process that involved this much technical review work where I had staff briefing me almost every 6 months along the way. And especially as we got closer to the end of it, they were so proactive in making sure that we were involved. And I know that they did a very large amount of consultation with the community. And I want to thank them for that because it's not even just the brain power that they had to put into writing the document and making sure that it was strong enough to withstand any type of appeal, and I'm sure there will be appeals. But the fact that they put so much care into listening to the communities, which is what I'm so greatly and deeply grateful for. They went out and spoke to the communities in the many different ways that they could, either through social media channels, through videos, through live presentations and streamings, and they were able to sort of make sense of probably hundreds, if not thousands, I'm sure thousands at this point, of different communications. And I'm so grateful that they actually heard all the comments that came back, and they actually carefully considered every single
Thank you, Councillor Wong Tam. Your time.
I just want to say thank you, and this is it's so big of a document, and it just feels not fair to give them only 5 minutes.
Councillor Troisi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just before I have comments.
Oh, sorry, hold on. Councillor Shiner, you have a question?
Yes, I do, of my colleague. I haven't seen your motions. I saw the building one. Have you run them by the planning staff?
Yes, everything was shared with planning staff, as I understand it.
Because when I asked them, they weren't aware of what the motions were. So who did you share them with? No
Sure.
disrespect.
No, not at all. Let me just double check. I believe it was Andrew Farnham who was here, and I know this is coming through staff, so sorry about that.
And can you just tell me briefly what they are? Because I haven't seen them. My apologies.
Yeah, so the first motion is largely speaking to site and area specific policy 211, which deals with the Yorkville Midtown, North Midtown planning framework. It's to ensure that that particular document is going to be part of the evaluation of every application moving forward. So it just makes it much more clear. So it's not just that it's TO Core, but it's TO Core with that specific document. And then the subsequent motion immediately after that is to really direct how we read the documents together. Is that helpful?
It is.
Okay. And there's one more piece. And the third piece is, because there's three portions to the motion. The third piece is that we would request that the province of Ontario strengthen the requirements for minimizing sound transmission.
I saw that one.
Okay, and that's largely because of these very dense mixed-use environments. So rather than having to deal with MLS complaints afterwards, if we can somehow get it in front of it proactively, we're not going to create a new building code, but we're asking the province to amend theirs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I have a motion that we finish this item? Okay, moved by Councillor Cressy, all in favor. And then the bylaws, and then if we have any quick items. Okay, so let's, Councillor, all in favor? Councillor Troisi, on this item.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Just before I speak, there's two technical amendments for Councillor Joe Cressy on two motions, if we could quickly put those up. The two motions. Okay, I could speak.
It's okay.
Great, and then the second one. Okay, I just wanted to start by thanking staff across all the divisions that have worked on this comprehensive report. It is so important that the future of our downtown be planned in collaboration with staff from many sectors to address the complex needs of our city. Toronto's downtown has seen unprecedented growth for more than a decade. That growth has made Toronto's downtown a wonderful, livable place that gives people the opportunity to make their homes, find fulfilling work, and enjoy tremendous local culture in the core. It has also ensured tens of thousands visit each day for work or play. I'm particularly excited about the plan because it includes a lot of recreation facilities where we are building communities from the ground up, like in the East Waterfront, and understanding how to revitalize older sites like the Parliament Street Library. We're also carefully planning childcare through growth-related development. So very happy in terms of what's happening, especially in about 6 developments in the waterfront. The only thing I just wanted to add in terms of a technical correction, just because I like to bring St. Jamestown back on the map, is that we actually spell St. Jamestown correctly. It's 2 words. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice and brief. Councillor Shiner, did you have a question?
No, that's from last time. I just
Oh,
want to
okay,
speak.
if we
though.
can, all right. So, Councillor Shiner's to speak.
I'm okay speaking now. I just wanted to stand and rise because having the privilege to serve as the chair of the Planning and Growth Committee, I have seen such a substantial change in the last 8 months in the way that staff have taken the tasks that they have to do and get them done since last October. They've gone out with substantially more communication and working with people. They are listening to residents, they are listening to the industry, they are listening to councillors, and they are coming forward with documents that are extremely important. This particular document is an official plan amendment. It's providing the guidance that I think we have been looking for as the downtown of the City of Toronto continues to redevelop. What's been happening in our downtown is phenomenal. I don't know any other city in Canada that's had this type of growth. When some people talk sometimes about what happens in Vancouver, I think this is the size of Vancouver. This small amendment for our downtown core is the size of Vancouver, and we have a whole city around it, and we work collectively on that. And as my colleague said, the population has gone to 250,000 and will go to 500,000 with this plan living in the downtown core. But it's also going to go from 500,000 working to 850,000 people working in the core. That's this plan. It is phenomenal. And the work that it has taken and the undertaking collectively between all of our staff, the public meetings and the councillors is phenomenal to get a plan like this in place to provide the guidance for where development should go, the type of development, our parks and recreation needs, our community facilities, the infrastructure that's needed, public transportation, all those things that are needed to let this city grow properly are now in this document. And I really did want to take my hat off and give really sincere congratulations to all of the staff within the Planning and Growth Department, the Planning Department in particular, Mr. Lintern, for you and your staff's great leadership all this. I know that you have wonderful staff that work with you. It's not one alone. They're sitting right next to you now and they're begging that this gets finished tonight. They really like to see it done. Look at the clock. We extended to finish it. So it was really a sincere thanks to all of you and your staff and all the divisions that were able, and all the people that are over in the crowd there. That's an idea of the folks, to my colleagues, of how much work this has taken, the tremendous effort that is taken to get this here and hopefully to get this approved. So thank you.
Okay, we want to be able to have the staff go home early. Councillor Holyday.
And for that, I will be brief. But unfortunately, I will not support the plan, and I will explain why. I will say, yes, there are fantastic elements in here, a number of tremendous work, but there are some elements that I disagree with, and that should be no surprise because they are files, they speak to files that I've struggled with council here on a number of occasions. I would say that the plan does a lot if you live within the boundaries or spend most of your time here, but the concern I have is it doesn't fully connect to outside of here. And what I mean by that is if you are traveling in by car, which some people will do, I think you'll find over time the constraints that the plan offers. And it does. It does speak to narrowing roadways. It does speak to converting lanes. And I understand the rationale for that. But I do worry about the connectivity to the overall city within these borders. And you know, the fear I have is that one day, you know, you really will only be able to visit this area if you come by transit, which for many is a great way to go. I mean, I use transit regularly myself, but not everybody can. And I think what will happen is people will get put off from visiting this great part of the city. And what that does is it begins to divide us as a single city. And I think there'll be negative sentiment because people won't want to come because it's hard to get here. And I realize part of that is due to population growth, but some of it is the policies that are in this. And you know, I have not been happy with things like the Bloor Street bike lanes and the King Street pilot and others that will probably follow because of the priorities that are and the policies that are contained in here. And I will continue to oppose those because I think they're not fully in the interest for the constituents that I represent that are outside of this area. I hope we can find ways to work together over time, but at this juncture, it's just not something I'm totally happy with, and I won't be able to support the overall document because of a few of the elements in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker. I hadn't intended to say anything, but I thought it was important we end on a positive note. When this came to planning and growth, I noticed something about it, which is that if this had been a plan for any other municipality in Ontario, this would be their entire official plan. That's the scope of work that we're dealing with here. That's the level of complexity, the depth of thought, the amount of consultation, and the tremendous brain power that went into what I think is going to be the plan that takes us from the very ambitious city that we are into being a truly global city. And to be a truly global city, and I have to disagree with the deputy mayor here, you have to recognize that, like London or Paris or any of the great cities in the world, it's not a place that you drive through. It's a place where you live, where you work, where you play, where you shop, and yes, you take transit, or you cycle, or you walk. You can't put more people onto the same number of roads using automobiles and expect it to work. So I respectfully have to disagree with the comments from Councillor Holyday and instead ask you to support the comments made by Councillor Cressy, Councillor Troisy, Councillor Wong Tam, and the chair of our Planning and Growth Committee, Councillor Shiner, and to acknowledge the fantastic work that the people who live in this community have done to get this plan to fruition, and that our staff and these great leaders on City Council have done to get this plan to fruition. I'm thrilled to be able to vote for it.
Thank you. Okay, so our first motion is motion 1A by Councillor Cressy on PG 29.4. On favor? Recorded vote.
Only the first motion 1 and 2 are on this item. That next one is on item 5. So
Yeah.
when we get to item 5.
Yeah.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Councillor Pragadakis, please. Councillor DiCiano. Councillor Fletcher. Councillor DiCiano, please. Councillor Robinson, please.
Motion 1A carries unanimously, 33 in favor.
Motion 1B by Councillor Cressy on PG 29.4. Did we want to record a vote on that too? Yeah. I heard Councillor Kelly, did you say yes? No, he said no. He said no. Oh, for Pete's sakes, come on. Yes.
If you can just help us vote on this to explain, so these are supplemental report amendments?
Yeah,
Am I correct in that? And then, so this will come as an item as amended?
Yes.
And are we voting for all of the reports of all the items held, or as a package, or are we voting
No,
on
we're
each of the
voting on
items?
all of them separately.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, now these amendments are for 29.4. The first item. Yes, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Mahavik, Councillor Palian, please. Councillor Robinson, please.
Motion 1B carries unanimously, 33 in favor.
Motion 2A by Councillor Wong Tam on item PG 29.4. On favor? Carried. Motion 2B by Councillor Wong Tam on item PG 29.4. All in favor? Carried. Motion 2C by Councillor Wong Tam on item PG 29.4. All in favor? Carried. Now on PG 29.4 as amended. Recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, please. Councillor Wong Tam, Councillor Shiner, Councillor Pasternak, please.
Councillor DiCiano, please.
Councillor DiCiano, please.
The item is amended, carries 31-2.
Okay, our next item is PG 29.5. And we have an amendment by Councillor Troisi, 3A. All in favor? Carried. Motion 3B by Councillor Troisi on PG 29.5. All in favor? Carried. On PG 29.5 as amended, all in favor? Carried. PG 29.6, all in favor? Recorded vote.
Councillor Wong Tam, please. Councillor McMahon, Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Perruzza.
Councillor Palacio, please. Thank you.
The item is adopted, 31-2.
PG 29.7. That's the last one. All in favor? Carried. Recorded vote.
Members, we had to cancel a vote and restart it, so please make sure you pressed your buttons. Councillor DeGiorgio, please, and thank you. Councillor Pasternak. Councillor Sau, please. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, please. And Councillor Kelly, please.
Councillor Pillion, please. Councillor DiCiano, please. Councillor Palacio.
Oh, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 33 in favor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll do quick releases, if we have any quick releases before we recess. Councillor Shiner.
Madam Speaker, on page 6, North York Community Council, NY 30.4, request for directions report, OPA amendment, bylaw amendment, 260 to 264, Finch Avenue East. There is an amended motion that I have. It's just to accept the revised with prejudice settlement offer. I'm moving it.
Okay, so on page 6, NY 30.4, a direction report. Councillor Shiner's moved an amendment. It's on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Page number 8, CC 41.9, 386 to 394 Symington Avenue, 405 Perth Avenue, and 17 Kingsley Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment appeals, request for further direction. I would like to move the following motions that have been drafted by city staff, and
We have it, it was just circulated.
okay, great, yeah.
Okay, including the confidential report.
And with a huge thank you to city staff from planning and legal for the good work.
It's not a quick item. Councillor Doucette would like to look at it. Councillor Davis?
Page 6, PW 29.7, Chapter 918, Technical Amendments clarifying the calculation of landscaping requirements for front yard parking, and I had my questions answered.
So, is it being held?
I don't need to hold it. You're welcome to hold it.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to hold it? Okay. Thank you. So Deputy Mayor Holliday will hold it. Councillor Perks?
Thank you, Speaker. Councillor Choicy introduced a motion that I don't believe is on the sheets.
It's a member's motion.
It's not ready? Okay, apologies. We'll have to get it tomorrow.
Okay? All right.
Thank you for that. We needed to end that on a positive note with a counterbalance, so thank you.
I'm sorry, what was it? Councillor Robinson, you have a quick item?
I didn't know they had it ready, so thank you, Madam Speaker. Also, I was just going to see if I could release PW 29.3, the utility cut process.
Yes.
Can I release that?
Okay, you're just releasing it?
Yeah.
Okay, so on page 6, PW 20.
Is it ready? Is it ready?
Okay, if you.
It's the next item.
Like, try to get these things done so we can. Okay, Councillor Robinson?
Yes, I'm sorry I don't have the number in front of me. It's an application, a development application. I just want to refer it back to North York Community Council, and I don't have the number. Could this clerk share the number? They have it.
It's CC 41.5.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
On page 8.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So you're referring it back to North York?
Yeah. Referring
Okay.
it.
So on page 8, CC 41.5, Councillor Robertson is referring it back to North York Community Council. On favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. Who's? I don't know. Councillor Thompson, you have a motion you need to add.
Yes, Speaker. It is a motion without notice on a matter dealing with the school board's proposal to have increases in development charges, which conflicts with the city's policies.
That requires a reopening now.
On favor?
No.
Recorded vote.
Well, we're introducing it. Okay, recorded vote to introduce.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor DiGiorgio. Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Pasternak, please. Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Pasternak, please.
The motion to introduce does not carry. The vote is 24 to 8. We need 30 to introduce. That's right.
Okay? Yeah. Councillor Saul. You have a motion to introduce the confirming bill.
Yes, Speaker. Speak that leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council meeting 41 on May 22nd and 23rd, 2018. Thank you very much.
Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Davis. Councillor Perks, please.
Councillor Fillion, please. Councillor Palacio. Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fillion, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Palacio, please.
Please, councillors, take your seat. Councillor Aljamari, Councillor de Bearmaker, Councillor Shiner, Robinson, Thompson, McMahon.
Councillor Fillion, your vote, please.
Please remain in your
Fletcher,
seats.
please.
Councillor Shiner.
Councillor Fillion, your vote, please. Councillor Fletcher, your vote, please.
Come on, it's just the last vote. Can you not sit in your seats?
The motion to introduce the confirming bill carries 31 to 1.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor McMahon. Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Layton. Councillor Thompson, please. Councillor Karagianis, please. Councillor Karagianis, please.
Councillor Ford, Councillor Fillion.
The motion to enact the confirming bill carries 31 to 1.
Recess to tomorrow 9:30. Thank you, and thank you to staff especially.